Hey, it's trade deadline day, and we're going live to talk about a couple of weird, unexpected trades for the Raptors, but all told, I think a pretty good day.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is the afternoon of Thursday, February the 8th, and the trade deadline is mercifully behind us. I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now, of course, for 10 seasons on various platforms. You can follow my work over on the website that sucks at Woodley Sean. You can find the show on Instagram at Locked On Raptors, and you can join us over right now on the Locked On Raptors Discord server. The link is in the description of this live podcast right now. You can join us on the Discord. It's a great spot to be among friends and among little trade deadline sickos and piggies just like you. Can't get enough of it in there, so come hang out. And mercifully, now the fake trade sickos chat in the Discord will surely be dead for months after the deadline, right? Right? We're done fake trades for a little while. I highly doubt it because people are sickos. But either way, come hang out with the sickos. Link in the description of the podcast. Would love to see you join our listener family over there on Discord. Reminder, as always, you can find this podcast for free wherever you get your podcasts on the audio app side of things. Follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend. Always appreciated. You can also go and support the show by going, of course, to this YouTube channel. And if you're here and haven't yet hit the subscribe button that's right below you, click that button. Helps me out, boosts my ego, and makes us more visible. You can also hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode when the show goes live or when the episodes of the day premiere. So thanks in advance for doing all of that. Okay, on today's show, which is brought to you by our pals over at PrizePicks, we are going to dive into all of the moves from trade deadline day. A couple of moves and a big move that did not happen in particular for your Toronto Raptors. We'll examine them all coming up today. Dennis Schroder to the Brooklyn Nets. That's a weird one. We'll sort of peel back the layers of that onion together. Bruce Brown stays put, and I think that's just fine by me. I know some people disagree, but we'll get into that. Of course, you can come hang out in the comments as well and all that good stuff. I'm probably not going to interact too much with the comments until maybe later in the show because my brain doesn't work that way and I will get totally derailed from the podcast. But talk amongst yourselves in the comments and have a good time in there. Of course, we'll start, though, with, I think, the biggest trade of the day. Is that fair to say? It's an interesting, not maybe league-wide. I think the Knicks trade was probably the biggest one. But as far as Raptors business goes, this was the big move. And it was the first move. It was one that happened while I was recording this morning's podcast, as the Toronto Raptors have acquired Kelly Olynyk and Ochai Agbaji from the Utah Jazz in exchange for Kira Lewis Jr., great, lovely Toronto Raptors legend Kira Lewis Jr., Otto Porter Jr., who played almost as many games as Kira Lewis Jr. over his 2 seasons with Toronto. That's a sad one to see, but obviously did not quite work with Otto Porter Jr., and that's fine. And the first-round pick, one of the first-round picks that came back in the Pascal Siakam trade, that pick being the worst of the Clippers or Thunder, essentially. The Rockets and Jazz are also tied into that one as far as who it gets conveyed to, but it'll be the worst of the Clippers or the Thunder picks. So probably the 29th pick in the draft, the 28th pick in the draft, not a very good pick. And so the Raptors used that pick in a draft where they already had a couple of extra picks, probably going to be like 18 from the Pacers, 31 from the Pistons, or 32 if the Pistons keep on winning like the juggernaut they seem to be. Either way, the Raptors use one of those extra picks in the back part of this year's draft to go and get a player in Ochai Agbaji, who I think is more likely than any unnamed teenager X they might have taken with that 28th or 29th pick in this year's draft to become like a member of the Scotty Barnes core over the coming years, or at least become a rotation piece on a team where Scotty Barnes is entering his early prime. Agbaji struggled this season, specifically shooting-wise, and this is after not struggling, notably to start the year, where he began the season shooting 63% from the corners up until about December 15th. After that, it's dropped off precipitously, down, I believe, in the 20s from three-point range from the corners in that time. So it's been a weird up and down season. I spoke with David Locke, who, of course, hosts Locked On Jazz. He's the grand poobah of the Locked On Podcast Network earlier today. He said that Ochai Agbaji is maybe just his favorite guy he's ever dealt with in his time covering the Utah Jazz. He's been covering the Utah Jazz for a very long time. Seems to be a very highly regarded just guy to have around your team, a lovely person who works hard and all that stuff. Of course, he's a winner from his time in college and all that stuff too with Kansas. Hey, Jayhawks reunion between him and Grady Dick. That's fun. But yeah, Agbaji is, I think, a nice little flyer here for the Raptors. But frankly, I think Kelly Olynyk is the bigger part of this trade for the Raptors. Bobby Webster just spoke to the media before I popped on here, and he was pretty glowing in his praise for Olynyk, and it sounds as though Olynyk wants to be in Toronto and that an extension is not even off the table in the next little while here. He is extension eligible right now. They can extend him, I believe, for up to 2 years, which, hey, for a 33-year-old guy, that's maybe a perfect amount of time to go and extend him for. And with Olynyk, I know the sort of blush response is, you traded a first-round pick for a 33-year-old guy? That's a buying move, which, like, it's not a buying move. It's just a trade to improve your basketball team and your position going forward. And the position of this team is they're figuring things out. They're recentering around Scotty Barnes. They're trying to reestablish some sort of culture. They're trying to build from the ground up. And a guy like Kelly Olynyk, a 33-year-old sage vet who has been awesome this season for Utah, who brings playmaking, who brings three-point shooting, who brings just sort of like veteran acumen. That's an incredibly valuable player to have on a team that is learning and building and trying to bring itself up from where it currently is stationed. And if you want to sort of get an idea of why a player like Olynyk can be helpful, can be conducive to a developmentally friendly environment, simply ask the 2023-24 Utah Jazz, who are going to be a much worse team now without Kelly Olynyk tying things together for that squad. He's been fantastic this season, like 8-4-4, nice shooting splits, really connective play. He's been really, really good for this Utah Jazz team. And I think he's going to be a perfect addition to what the Raptors are doing. We'll get into Thad Young, who is no longer on the Raptors, but I think we're going to see Kelly Olynyk just kind of do a supercharged version of what Thad Young has been over the last 6 weeks or so, where he's come in, been an agent for greasing the offensive wheels, and has just been a really nice piece to count on. But he does it at 6'11" and not 6'8", and so there's actually a little bit more in terms of like length and defensive ability there from Kelly Olynyk too. I like that addition. And if they're going to keep him around on a cheap deal for the next couple seasons, why not give yourself 48 minutes of center play between Jakob Poeltl and Kelly Olynyk, where you have varied skill sets? Of course, they can go small with Scotty Barnes at the 5 as well. That's a look that's going to be in their bag, but they don't have to lean on that now. This, I think, sort of softens the blow of losing Christian Koloko due to the health reasons, obviously, that he's no longer with the Toronto Raptors. That was a big loss this season, not having a steady backup who could go in and kind of offer a different look from Jakob Poeltl. Olynyk very much does that. A different type of player, obviously, than Christian Koloko was, but I think still backup center play, very valuable. This team has needed it. There's a reason Thad Youngs looks so good as a small ball 5 doing these things. Olynyk's just a better version of that. And if you can keep him around for a couple years, at 10, 12 million bucks a year, I think that's a perfectly tidy piece of business for a draft pick that, there's only so much you can do with 3 picks in one given draft. You can only draft so many rookies and give them ample enough playing time and opportunity to develop. I think turning one of those picks into an actual piece who can help the sort of developmental side of things while also getting a flyer in Agbaji who just might become like a nice 8th man for you, who brings some perimeter defense, which this team sorely needs. I think it's a really nice little move here for the Raptors. It's not sexy by any means, and it seems on the surface like some kind of buying move, but I think it really is just a move kind of investing further in this reimagined vision of the team around Scotty Barnes. And I'm quite looking forward to seeing how Olynyk and Agbaji figure into the mix. You would think both will be in the rotation. My sort of theoretical rotation is basically the same starting 5 we've seen, with Gary Trent Jr. not getting moved. So you'll see the starting 5 of Quickly, Trent, Barrett, Barnes, and Poeltl. I wouldn't mind seeing Olynyk swap in for Trent, honestly. If you want to go a little bit bigger, I have no problem with that. But off the bench, you'll have Olynyk, you'll have Agbaji, you'll have Grady Dick, you'll have Bruce Brown. Jordan Nwora maybe figures in and gets some opportunity. Chris Boucher is still around. Maybe he kind of finds his way back into the plans after it seemed like he was very much headed out the door going into this deadline. either way, I think Olynyk slots beautifully into that second unit, is going to give the Raptors like a real jolt of playmaking and just sort of, again, veteran know-how and knowing where to stand and all that stuff. Not to mention the whole like Canadian angle. That's fun, right? Bobby Webster's talked about this. He talked about it today, and it does seem like a pretty clear directive for the Raptors is getting guys who want to be in Toronto and leaning on the advantage that is being a Canadian team. You can get guys on your team who want to be here. You can keep it affordable deals and all that stuff. That is using your position as the lone Canadian franchise to your advantage as well. So all thumbs up for me on the Kelly Olynyk Ochai Agbaji trade. Even if Agbaji is maybe less of a sure thing, I think there's something there. On top of just being a really fun and cool dude, like there's definitely some version of like a 3-and-D guard type in there, maybe like an Avery Bradley type at the very high end outcome. If you can kind of achieve that, he's had some spurts of really good play. But even if he doesn't end up being that type of guy, I think getting Kelly Olynyk in the door and not really expending all that much in terms of pick capital is fine by me. And the other thing too is, I think it's notable that they traded the 29th or 28th pick in this draft and not the one that's going to be 31 or 32. There's actual contractual benefits to having that 31st pick in the second round versus a very late first round pick. Very similar talent pool you're pulling from, but that first round pick comes with way more guarantees, higher salary, whereas the second rounder offers a little bit more flexibility in terms of how you can structure contracts and things like that to sort of manipulate your books. So I think all told, a nice little piece of business for the Raptors here. And, it doesn't do a whole lot for me to soften the blow of the Pascal Siakam trade. It's now Siakam for 2 firsts, Kelly Olynyk, Ochai Agbaji, and Bruce Brown and Jordan Nwora. That's not really doing it for me, but obviously the big sort of tell here will be what happened with Brown in the summer. We'll talk about that later, and sort of what takes place in the summer now as the Raptors use all of this added flexibility to go and try to reshape their team around Scotty Barnes. The sort of bill has not yet been printed off as far as the Pascal Siakam trade, although still not my favorite deal in the world as it stands right now. Either way, we'll come back on the other side. We'll get into the Dennis Schroder thing, which was weird. Came out of nowhere. Dennis Schroder is a Brooklyn Net, as is Thad Young. Spencer Dinwiddie, we had you for a sec, but now he's gone. He's been waived. We'll talk about that bizarre piece of business and the money it saves for the Toronto Raptors. Doesn't everybody love when money is saved by billion-dollar corporations? We'll talk about that coming up in just 1 second. First, though, a quick note from our pals over at Nissan. Are you the kind of driver who likes to push things a little further, ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have got a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. They've got class-exclusive Google built-in, and it's always your updating assistant to call on for almost anything you might need while you're in the car. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are right there built into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect midsize crossover for your next adventure. Of course, there's the 2024 Nissan Armada as well. Will change what you expect from a full-size SUV. You got a rugged 4x4 that can seat up to 8 in first-class luxury and style. Tow bigger and explore further in the 2024 Armada. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada to go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com right now. All right, we continue on here with your live reaction to the Toronto Raptors trade deadline. Again, hop on in the comments if you want to. Talk amongst yourselves. If you want to throw a few questions in there for me, I might be able to get to them at the very end of the show. But I just kind of wanted to do the big rundown of all the stuff that happened today for the Toronto Raptors, because a lot of stuff went down. Notably, to kick things off here in segment 2, the very bizarre Dennis Schroder to the Nets, along with Thad Young trade, bringing back Spencer Dinwiddie for a hot second before he was waived by the Toronto Raptors. And first blush with this trade, let me just take you through my thought process as this all went down in the afternoon. First process was, what's going on here? And I made the plea earlier on today's show, like the morning podcast reacting to the Hornets game, where I was talking about what a nice night Dennis Schroder had. I made the plea to not simply just trade Dennis Schroder for the sake of trading Dennis Schroder. This was sort of with the assumption they were going to go trade him for second round picks or, a couple picks from some team looking to add him for a contention run. And that obviously didn't happen here. I don't know if this was a trade for the sake of a trade. It was a trade for the sake of something. It was strange, and it caught me off guard. And originally, I was like, okay, well, you trade Schroder. You are getting back Dinwiddie, who is off the books. If they were going to take it to free agency this summer, $18 million coming off the books. They've obviously waived him, but that money's no longer on their books. So that's, some savings, I suppose, long term. I think there's like a small hit for waiving him while he's still under contract, but that's not for me to worry about. That's for the cap nerds to worry about. Either way, my thinking originally was, okay, well, you bring Dinwiddie back, you save some money long term, you get off of Dennis's money for next season, and you still have competent backup point guard play. This was still at the time where it seemed like they were going to trade Bruce Brown as well. And my biggest thing was, you simply cannot punt on quality backup point guard play if you're going to finish off this season, because as much as everyone wants to tank for the pick, oh my God, the pick, the truth of the matter is, it's very unlikely the Raptors fall lower than 6th in the lottery odds. The Blazers are playing all right. Maybe the Blazers pass the Raptors, but the Memphis Grizzlies have lost 6 in a row and have no players and are probably going to fully pack it in for the rest of this season. They traded away Xavier Tillman, traded away Steven Adams in a deal that did not add anything to their team. Obviously, Adams wasn't helping them this year either, but it seems like it's pretty obvious the Grizzlies have said, you know what, we're going to go into the tank here. And so that leaves the Raptors. Even if the Blazers pass them, I don't think it's realistic they keep pace of sucking as bad as the Memphis Grizzlies. And so that leaves them in the position here where the lowest they can fall in the lottery is the 6th spot. And to me, because that leaves you with just a 45% chance of even keeping your top 6 protected pick, of course, sent out last deadline in the Aka trade, because of that reality, to me, it's basically irrelevant where the Raptors finish, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th in the lottery. Just play out the season, be in the interest, play it out in the interest of having developmentally productive basketball. Get some real reps. Try to actually win games. Whether you make the play-in, whether you don't, that's irrelevant too. Where they finish does not matter to me, because they cannot finish lower than 6th or better than 6th in the lottery odds. And so at best, keeping their pick is a coin flip. And with that, it's out of your control. It's in the hands of the lottery gods. What you can control is playing real basketball. And I thought Dennis Schroder was going to be very essential to playing real basketball, as backup point guards typically are. And so when they moved him for Dinwiddie, I thought, okay, Dinwiddie can be that. He can be a perfectly fine backup point guard. Yeah, there's been some weird sort of, locker room stuff with him at various stops throughout his career. Maybe he's not the most beloved teammate or anything like that, but he's a 12 points, 6 assists guy. He can be a perfectly fine backup point guard for this team. Of course, they waive him. When they waived him, that to me was the signal, oh, they're not moving Bruce Brown. And obviously they did not end up moving Bruce Brown. I'll talk about why I don't mind that at all coming up in just a second here. But ultimately, it seems clear that Bruce Brown is now going to be their backup point guard. And I think that's perfectly fine. As far as just giving up on Dennis Schroder and saying, you know what, we don't want you for next year. It's tough, right? I don't think I was itching to go see him moved. And I do think this is a sort of interesting and not great move as far as, being as competitive as you can be down the stretch of this season. But I also think the shuffling out of Schroder, you bring in Olynyk, who I think is a clear upgrade on Thad Young, and also brings some playmaking chops to the table. You have Bruce Brown. You have now some health, Jakob Poeltl's back. Quickly and Barrett are back. The last 6 weeks have been so riddled with upheaval that I don't know if they're at all representative of what the actual sort of record this team is capable of. And I do think Olynyk plus a clearly defined Bruce Brown, who's engaged and actually is still on the team and not expecting to be traded any minute, like it was clear the last couple of weeks was the case. I think you get a more engaged Bruce Brown, and I think a more engaged, more focused Bruce Brown as a backup point guard plus Kelly Olynyk is probably an upgrade in the grand scheme of things over Dennis Schroder. And I know lots of people love Schroder. I know people, he's kind of a polarizing guy, it seems. I think he was okay for the Raptors this season. I think he was very good when he was in the 6-man role. I think he was pretty damaging to what the Raptors were trying to do when he was miscast as a starter. That's not his own fault. He's just not a 35-minute-a-game starter on a team that's being serious. And that was the Raptors' fault for sort of putting him into that spot to begin the year. But I think as much as his play as a 6-man has been fantastic of late, I think they can withstand this and still play credible ball down the stretch because they've kept Bruce Brown. even without keeping Spencer Dinwiddie. It's a strange one. The rotation now, I suppose, looks something like, again, I went through the starters. You got Trent and Quickly in your backcourt, Barrett, Barnes, and Pirtle up front. And then coming off the bench, you're going to have Olynyk. You're going to have Grady Dick, obviously, I think, in line for a big minutes uptick here. Ochai Agbaji is going to play a lot. Bruce Brown, Jordan Nwora, Chris Boucher. Like, you're going to have, I think 11, 12 different guys you can go roll out there with like a sort of like a core of 9, I would assume. So I don't think they're going to be all that hurt depth-wise by not having Dennis Schroder. They traded a first-round pick and 2 non-rotation players for 2 guys who are going to play in the rotation. I don't think their depth is any worse off after today, even with the Schroder deal. I guess it just comes down to, if the plan is to move Bruce Brown in the summer, does that make you have to go back on the search for a good backup point guard? But maybe backup point guards are easy to find. They got Dennis Schroder with the mid-level exception. Maybe you can go and do that, and it's not a huge challenge or sort of task for you to go and find someone who can give you Schroder-like production. And there were some, I think Michael Grange might have talked about this on the Raptors show today. I didn't quite see the exact wording of it, but maybe some implications that Schroder wanted to start, wasn't super thrilled with sort of the situation. And if that's the case, like, we don't know. If there was friction about Schroder's role at all this season, it's pretty clear that they did a good job of keeping that under wraps, right? I think the relationship with Darko clearly helped with that. And it just sort of like, if it was going on behind the scenes, they did a damn good job of not making it come out to the forefront throughout the year. But if that was a thing they knew was going on and Schroder was a little agitated about the role, I don't see the problem really in moving on from him. And again, the money savings here are a real thing. They are going to save an extra $10 million this summer by making this move than they would have otherwise. With Thad coming off the books, they were going to have that $8 million off the books anyway, but instead of $8 million off the books, it's $18 million off the books in the form of Spencer Dinwiddie. So there's that. I think, it depends what they do with that cap space and what they do with the money. We'll get into that coming up in just a sec when we get to Bruce Brown and what keeping him opens up for the summer. But overall, strange trade. I don't know if I can even give it a grade. It's just like a question mark, because we have to see sort of what comes next. But I'm not up in arms about moving on from Dennis Schroder. I don't think their ability, after all the moves today, to play meaningful competitive basketball down the stretch is all that much changed by having the guys they have now versus the guys they had 24 hours ago. We'll come back, close it out on the other side, talk about Bruce Brown not getting traded, which I think has caused lots of people to be very mad, which I'm going to tell you is wrong. It's perfectly fine that Bruce Brown did not get traded just because he could have gotten traded. We'll talk about that and why that is coming up in just 1 second. Of course, today's show is brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks, a very fun daily fantasy sports platform you got to go check out right now. All you got to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and whether your players are going to get more or less than whatever's been projected by PrizePicks. If you get all of those correct, you're going to win some bank. And right now, it's demon time at PrizePicks. I don't even know what this means, but I love doing this read because it's awesome and the words are fun and playful. You can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Demons and goblins are the newest and most exciting way to play at PrizePicks. Demons and goblins. Again, I don't even understand, but it's fantastic. You got squares ranked with or marked with red demons or green goblins, and they offer you different payouts so that can amplify what you're making. You can win up to 100 times your money with just 4 correct picks. That is pretty sweet. So go right now to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA for first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Code LockedOnNBA for first deposit match up to $100 with PrizePicks. Daily fantasy sports made easy. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, rounding it out here, your live reaction episode to the NBA trade deadline and the Toronto Raptors work at the deadline. And in this case, the lack of work on Bruce Brown. Bruce Brown not going anywhere, going to finish this season, and who knows beyond that with the Toronto Raptors. And look, going into the deadline, it seemed like he was one of the most likely guys to move of anybody on the board across the league. I think the chances of it happening really went down when the Knicks made that trade where they traded off Evan Fournier, Quentin Grimes, and whatever else they traded off to go and get Bojan Bogdanovic and Alec Burks, a trade that I think Pistons fans are really upset about, as they should be, because the Pistons are the Pistons and they should be mad all the time. Obviously, the Knicks get a whole lot better and they're terrifying, and I'm really happy for them because the Knicks are cool. As much as that's not a thing you want to hear Raptors fans say, we have to admit it. The Knicks are cool. There's nothing we can do about it. Either way, the Bruce Brown thing, there was a lot of like anger out there. How could you not trade Bruce Brown? Oh my God. How could you not get a first round pick? Here's the thing. The Raptors were under no obligation to move Bruce Brown at this deadline. There was no rush to go and do this. I've said this for weeks. The opportunity cost of just trading him for the first thing you could get offered at this deadline was real. You get into the summertime, you have Bruce Brown, you have the extra picks you've gotten from the Pascal trade and the OG trade in the form of 31, obviously. You have potentially, if you convey your pick this summer, all of your future picks to play with and that Bruce Brown contract, as the NBA is about to be squeezed by the second apron, and you're going to be one of the very few teams with cap space and stuff to trade when teams are like, oh God, we have to shed money here. We have to dump players off. Maybe our star players don't fit here. Maybe we lose in the playoffs embarrassingly, and one of our star players has to move to Minnesota. Maybe this is what the Raptors are actually kind of planning for. And honestly, the way they've kind of cleared their decks, set themselves up going into this summer, while I don't agree with the sort of theory of having to trade Pascal Siakam, and I don't love the way the return they got for him, the way things have now been set up, all things considered, the Raptors are in a pretty good spot, and I do think they've been pretty proactive when it comes to preparing for what the CBA changes and the second apron and all of the penalties that are to come in for really expensive teams as of July 1, when the full weight of the new collective bargaining agreement is felt. The Raptors have set themselves up to be in a prime position to be opportunistic with that coming into the league, and the teams that are going to be squeezed by that are going to be looking at the Raptors like, oh man, there's a dumping ground for one of our players. And oh, they got lots of picks. Hey, they got Bruce Brown. Maybe that's a fine thing if we turn one of our players into a Bruce Brown plus picks package to save us some money. That's going to be a real thing that's on the table for the Raptors this summer. Obviously, they can also just keep Bruce Brown into next season. He's going to be someone who's valuable at next year's trade deadline as well. Probably easier to move because he's an expiring. He doesn't have the money, which I know it's a team option this summer, which the Raptors could decline if they want to and maximize cap space. That's also an option. This is the thing. Options, flexibility. That's what Bruce Brown being on this roster still provides them going forward. But even if you get to next year's deadline, there should be something available out there for Bruce Brown. And there clearly wasn't at this year's deadline, and that's fine. The landscape changes, right? And, the competitive windows for teams are altered and teams have more stuff to trade. Maybe the Lakers are more serious next year. Maybe the Warriors are back in a spot where they're making additive moves, whatever it might be. Teams get new picks they can trade every year as pick, outlays roll over to new seasons, et cetera, et cetera. New drafts happen. The landscape changes. There will be something available for Bruce Brown at the very worst at next year's deadline. And if you keep him into next year and he's playing well for you, and Scotty Barnes is doing the thing again, and maybe this team is looking more competitive than you thought, then maybe he's just a piece for that Scotty Barnes window as well. He's 27 years old. He's not dead. And if you get into next year's offseason, so the 2025 offseason, Bruce Brown will be an expiring guy. He'll be a free agent. And he's a free agent who I think even in his own heart of hearts knows he's not a $22 million a year player. He knows he got that deal from the Pacers, who had cap space to burn, and we're looking to throw it around, probably in the interest of making a big trade in season, which they did successfully. Good on you, Pacers. And Bruce Brown now becomes this guy who can be all sorts of things for the Raptors, even Bruce Brown, right? Like, I think not moving him, if they didn't find a move they liked at this year's deadline, if they weren't getting the offers, and obviously, the Mavericks were thrown out as a team. The Mavericks go and get PJ Washington, which I think is hilarious. I don't think that's a good move. I don't think PJ Washington's very good, but that's the type of player they needed more than it needed a Bruce Brown. They have plenty of smaller guard types on that team. They needed some actual size up in the front court. So I don't think the Mavs ever made all that much sense. The Lakers never made sense because the Lakers shouldn't be doing anything right now to compromise their future because the Lakers stink. And so that was never a deal for me. The only deal that really stood out as being viable was that Knicks deal if Quentin Grimes and a first-round pick were going to come back. And I don't blame the Knicks for doing something different and getting two guys who help them address their needs from the Pistons and, shuttling that pick, that sort of package elsewhere without actually giving up a first round pick for Bojan or for Alec Burks. And so when that fell off the table, I said this for a bit, like it seemed like maybe we were overestimating the market for Bruce Brown, and that seems to have been correct. But that doesn't mean there won't be a market for Bruce Brown going forward, or that having his contract on the books doesn't give them a ton of flexibility, while also giving them just like a perfectly nice backup point guard who was the backup point guard last year for the literal NBA champions. Maybe he's not a traditional point guard, but we've seen him run pick and roll with Thad Young of all people, and it's been working. I think him and Kelly Olynyk in the second unit, that's some fun, savvy stuff. You can have those two guys run actions together. You'll have, of course, him sprinkle into some starting lineups and closing lineups at times as well. I think there's lots of reasons to be happy Bruce Brown is playing for the Raptors. And as far as these sort of concerns about his lack of effort and stuff like that, now he knows he's on the team. I think for the last 31 games, you can bank on a more engaged Bruce Brown than the Bruce Brown we saw on this team over the last couple weeks, where everyone and their mother was predicting a trade of Bruce Brown. And I'm pretty sure Bruce Brown also felt that. Now he knows he's here. Now there's some just clarity as to what this team looks like and what they're trying to do. I would imagine we'll see Bruce Brown be a perfectly fine backup point guard who's trying relatively hard and offering better wing defense and point of attack defense than he has so far. And I think, again, filling in the backup point guard role for Dennis Schroder, I think he's going to be perfectly cromulent in that role. Overall, really a lot of sort of the judgment here does depend on what happens this summer, right? That's the thing as far as the transaction windows. We now turn our attention to the draft and the summer, and lots of things can happen from there, right? There is all sorts of optionality for the Raptors. They can go and try to sign a free agent. They're probably going to have $40 million in cap space per our pal Daniel Hackett. That will be changed, obviously, if they sign Gary Trent Jr. or they sign Kelly Olynyk. Bobby Webster saying today that Gary Trent Jr. is kind of a TBD situation for them, which totally fair. Let's see how he plays over the last 30 games. We look at this last 30 games like, oh, wow, it's like the season's winding down. No, this is 40% of the season still left for them to learn stuff. And that's valuable time to learn stuff when you're going into a summer where you have all these different options and possibilities. Get more information so you can make the right decisions once you get there. I think that's fine. And we'll see with Gary. But they can have the cap space free agency route, right? Maybe they want to go throw a big bag at Malik Monk. Probably not what I would do considering their roster construction, but that's an option if they want to go and do that. There's, of course, the trade option. When you have cap space, the nice thing is in the summertime, when you have cap space, you can make trades and you don't have to worry about salary matching quite as much. You can have a $20 million Bruce Brown contract, take in a $45 million player, and if you have the cap space, you just take them into your cap space. It's that simple. That's a benefit. Also, there is renting your cap space, right? You have all these teams this summer that are going to be pinched by the second apron. Maybe the Raptors don't find a guy they want to go and make a move for this summer to bolster the Scotty Barnes timeline. That's okay. You can use the extra cap space you have this summer to bring in other players and get picks attached to those players to help other teams out. You have more picks to work with. You have more tradable salaries, probably expiring money, things like that. And you can kick the sort of cycle of looking for pieces to add to the Scotty Barnes team a little bit down the road. And I think that's fine. This is not going to be a one summer fix to what this team is. They're going to be, I think, on the prowl for big defensive wing types for the next foreseeable future until they can land one. And maybe it happens this summer. Having Bruce Brown on hand makes that a little bit easier to facilitate. If it doesn't happen this summer, you have other options going forward as well, using that cap space for more than just signing free agents. Oh, but people don't want to sign in Toronto. No, they'll never get big free agents. A, you can get decent free agents. It's not superstars, but you can get decent ones. And B, it's not all the cap space is for. And frankly, in today's NBA, where free agency is more or less dead, cap space is for less free agency and more for this other sort of trade machination stuff than anything else. So all told, interesting day for the Raptors. I don't have a problem really with anything they did. The Schroder thing's bizarre, but I think there will probably end up being reasons behind it that reveal themselves to be more clear, whether it's with the plans they have up their sleeve this summer or just with maybe reporting that comes out about Schroder and his time in Toronto. He'll go down as one of the best free agent signings still in Toronto Raptors history, which is hilarious. Ultimately traded for nothing, but traded for money is, in the NBA where cap space and money, and I hate talking about cap space. It's boring. It's lame. It's for the cap nerds, but like it's undeniably true that having money to burn and having available cap space this summer as the league gets pinched by the second apron is going to be incredibly valuable. And the Raptors have done a good job of getting proactive on that front. That is going to do it, I think, for today's show. Thanks so much for hanging out. Really appreciate all of you for jumping in and checking out the show. We'll be back again tomorrow with sort of more refined thoughts, I'm sure, on what's going on here with the Raptors around the deadline. But until then, thank you so much for tuning into the show, for supporting the show, all that good stuff. You're all the very, very best. And, subscribe, follow, rate, review, tell a friend, all that good stuff. It's always appreciated when you support the show, however it is you support the show. It's free to support. It's a free show. It's there every day for you. It can't hurt to like be a little nice and give us some boosts up and thumbs up and ratings and stuff in the apps and all that. So thanks in advance for doing that. And we will talk to you again tomorrow with another episode of Locked On Raptors. Thanks so much for hanging. Bye-bye. I am never going to hit this shot.